This bookcase fits together kind of like Legos. And it looks like that. It's not looking that great right now. It's dirty, it's got paint marks on it. But bear in mind, somebody threw this out. It was on the side of the street. But doing some Googling, bookcases like this are anywhere from $500 to $1,500 that people are trying to sell them for when they're in good condition. And so we're going to try to make this one to be in a lot better condition. These are commonly called Barrister bookcases. I guess they were really popular with lawyers back in the day. They have these, glass doors that lift up and slide back so you can access the books or you can protect things from dust. But the original manufacturer called them elastic bookcases. I guess that's because you could stretch them, if you will, by just adding another module. On top of each module, you have this board down the middle, which fits into a matching notch on the bottom of the module above it. This is from the Globe-Wernicke company. This was built in Stratford, Ontario here in Canada, but I know the parent company is based in Ohio. This is the 10 1/4 module, and this is the that style number referred to the type of wood species and the finish on it. This one is white oak with a dark finish, and this was the 10 1/4 inch size. This one over here is an 8 1/2 inch size, so I have two different size modules. They're all about 34 inches wide. My understanding is that that was a standard length. So if I were to find one at a yard sale or an antique market or whatever, I should be able to buy a module and have it nest with this. Just need to interrupt myself for a quick moment here. It's kind of hard to believe, but literally while I was editing this chunk of the video, my wife came to me with these two pictures that she'd taken. She'd been at a local mall, and there were a number of craft and antique vendors there, and one of them had an elastic bookcase just like this one. It didn't have any maker marks on it, so it's no guarantee it's from the same factory, but it sure looked identical. And no, they wanted $900 for it, and it's definitely makes mine look not so bad, because that one's definitely beat up also. Like it's missing a knob in the bottom. I think that one has a drawer in the bottom unit. It's stained dark, but it's not white oak. I just thought that was neat. I did do some reading, and it looks like they did have longer and shorter ones, but in general, they all were sized to fit together. I also found this label, which talks about the Canada Furniture Manufacturers Limited. And this puzzled me at first because, this says Canada Furniture Manufacturing here inside the base, but then the rest of it says Globe-Wernicke. And doing some Googling online, there was this guy in Canada who bought the franchise in 1902 and brought it to Stratford. And I'm betting that at some point, Canada Furniture Manufacturing probably took over the franchise from that guy. It's kind of hard to do some Googling with this because when I do searching for Globe-Wernicke bookcases, I'm generally finding people trying to sell them or looking for parts or selling parts, not so much just historical documents about the company itself. So that's why I'm guessing this is about 100 years old. They started in Canada in 1902. It's a bit of a guess. They have this crisscross metal mechanism here attached to the doors to help prevent them from racking when you slide them up, and it's really quite ingenious. Turn this one on its side so you can get a little better look at it. It's just a crisscross piece of metal. There's some eyelets that go into the door. There's a fixed point down here, and then there's again an eyelet here, so as you slide the door in and out, it slides in the eyelets, and I think I've disconnected it because it's not meant to be sideways. But anyways, it slides through the eyelets as it goes in and out. My original plan was to strip them down and refinish them. The more I researched it, the more I was reluctant to do it. I mean, they're not super rare, but they are somewhat rare. And I'm thinking I want to try to preserve it as much as possible. So I'm just going to start with soap and water and clean it up as much as I can, and then we'll move on from that. Probably got a shellac finish. I don't have any shellac solvent right now. Gotta do something about that. Yeah, does not look good. It was left out in the rain before I got it, but let's see. Yeah, I think I'm gonna need something more than just water. The doors are just resting on these tracks, and you can just lift them up, and then the track comes out, and then you can look at the door by itself. The inside is just plywood, dirty plywood, but it's just plywood. Now, unfortunately, this one has some warped plywood here, and I thought I would have to replace the whole plywood, but I really don't want to do that, since then you'd lose the original factory mark. I'm wondering if I can just sort of peel off this one layer of plywood and then glue on something else. That's for much later. Over on the other side of the same module though, this does not look good and there's ripples right here, so I'm afraid I might need to replace the bottom. But at least then there's no maker mark that you'd be damaging, but again, that's for later. For these little flecks on the glass, I just use a razor blade which takes them off. Looks like it might be old glue or something, I'm not sure. Also here on the base I got some paint and the razor blade is also doing a good job. Oh yeah. I'm trying to be very light. This whole bottom unit looks darker than this. I wonder if it's actually a different wood that they just tried staining, but I don't know. I'll have to look at it on the inside. Still, I think I'm cutting through the stain here, so I think I'm going to have to reapply something to darken it up. Yeah, definitely. Interesting, they have a little cutout here, so it was meant to fit over a quarter round in the corner of a room. Got some dirty rags, but these are looking a lot better. However, the top still has a lot of white on it. I'm not sure if that's a water damage or something else. I tried a little bit of razor blade, but I think that's actually starting to take off the finish. And over here on this one, there was a little bit of green paint that I just kept rubbing and rubbing and then using my fingernail. And now I think I'm right through some of the stain that was originally used. So I'm gonna have to get some touch up there. And yeah, this is where I put in the disclaimer that I am not an expert refinisher. I think I'm a pretty good woodworker, but refinishing and dealing with old finish and trying to match colors, that is a skill that I do not yet have. So I'm going to be fiddling around and doing my best. I don't think they're particularly rare, but they are antique. So I mean, I want to preserve it, but it's not like it's priceless. I mean, after all, somebody just threw it out and left it in the trash on a rainy day. But I'm hoping that I can restore it, or not restore it, I'm hoping I can bring it back to something nice. So I went over the whole thing first with a damp rag, and a little while later I went over it again, this time with soapy water and a rag, and I think it's pretty clean, but the finish is definitely damaged. I mentioned before that it was a rainy day when I picked this thing up off the street, but I don't think that did all this damage. I'm pretty sure this piece has been neglected for a while. I've come across a few sources that say this is probably a shellac finish, but I need to find that out for sure before I start doing anything with the finish. So I'm going to first test it in an unobtrusive spot. And so to do that, I've got some acetone and I've got some methyl hydrate. According to the company website, this is a version of methanol. A denatured alcohol is what people often use for shellac. It's not so commonly available in Canada, and this is supposedly an acceptable substitute. I've seen some web pages that say this is the same as denatured alcohol, and I've seen another website that says, no, it's not. Not a chemist. The company says it's methanol, and it also says right on the label that it will thin shellac. So acetone is acetone is acetone. So I'm first going to do a little acetone here. If it becomes tacky, then it is a shellac or varnish. If it dissolves, then it's lacquer, and if it beads up, then it's a polyurethane. And frankly, I can't tell. All right, let's try a bit of alcohol. Again, if it's shellac, it should just dissolve instantly, and varnish would react slowly. So I'm not getting definitive results right away, so this was the most obscure spot on the piece that I could find, and most of the finish is just on the visible spots, but I'm going to have to find something that's probably a bit more visible and give it a go. So I'm going to try a few more spots and get back to you. So next I tried the edge of one of the doors, and I'm pretty sure it's shellac because it seemed to just turn into sticky finish pretty quickly. So I think it's shellac. I hope I'm not wrong. I got a natural bristle brush and I've poured some methyl hydrate into a container, and I've read that just some alcohol will help get rid of these white marks, and I'm going to try that, and I hope it works, because basically this is the top of the piece. It has to look good. If it doesn't look good, I'm just going to have to end up stripping it down. I mean, I want it to look at. That looks good right now. Let's just see how it, it's interesting. The brush is picking up some black, which is presumably from the finish. So definitely feels sticky as I drag the brush through it. So I'm just, it's wet right now, but it sure looks better. I want to see what that looks like once it dries. So onward with that spot. The brush is definitely picking up, I think, some stain from the original finish. Well, I bought some more stain, might have to just add that in. Yeah, I'm not really happy with how this turned out. So some parts are really glossy, and then here I think I just went right through the stain, especially over here. I guess the stain did something weird. So I'm kind of guessing here, but I think I used too much alcohol, like too heavy a wipe of the alcohol. I've seen a few other resources now that they're really, really conservative when they're wiping on fresh alcohol onto the surface, but I don't know. I mean, I have no idea how they did the staining regimen on this piece, so I don't know what's going on. On the base, there was also, it's pretty beat up on the sides, and so I had also done the alcohol there, and it had the same results. So there, I experimented with just trying to lay on some stain, but it wouldn't work. So this is going to be my first refinishing experiment. I've sanded it right down to bare wood, and I'm going to do some staining. It's not all bad news. Here's where I had burned through the finish just by scraping it when I used some water, and what I've done here is I just have this little stain touch-up pen that I used, and this is a Minwax red mahogany, and I just dabbed it here and I dabbed it here. I can just see that there's a little bit of darkness here, but on the whole, I'm really happy with how that just sort of touched up. I mean, I think, you know, the top I'm probably going to end up sanding down to bare wood or bare plywood. But I mean, the other parts of it I'm going to try to leave alone as much as I can. A little side note here. I mean, I've been kind of fascinated with Barrister bookcases ever since I first read about them like 20 years ago when I was getting into the hobby. So it's been really cool to have one, and I really like having one, but it's also kind of fascinating to just see it from a technical point of view because it's factory furniture. You know, these were mass-produced 100 years ago. For the most part, they're put together with nails and plywood and stuff. Here, let me bring you in. So this is the top, and like this I'm not sure how thick it is, but this is quite thin plywood on top. It is not solid. This is solid wood on the edging, but most of it is plywood. And then here you can see it's just assembled with nails. There's a nail, there's a nail, and there's a nail. There's a nail. They're fairly well hidden, but they just did surface nailing right through the top of the piece. And here, this is the 10 1/4 unit, and it's like this is where you're supposed to put your books. This is a show face, but nail, 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 nail. This is just nailed right into the face of the shelf. Here, the base unit where I had to sand down the finish. This is a nice piece of white oak, but this appears to have like mineral stain right in it. You know, they just put together wood and count on the stain covering it up. So don't get me wrong, it's a neat old antique. I'm really glad I have it, but this is kind of the IKEA of 100 years ago, I'm thinking. It's just mass-produced factory furniture. I found a price list, and you know, I have no idea how the economies work, but I saw these were like, you know, $3 each or something like that. And I'm like, what is that in today's dollars? I should try looking that up. I'm really kind of curious. So I had to find out how much that was in today's money. I have found this catalog online. It's a copy of the Cincinnati catalog, so it's the mother company, and it's from 1906. On page 52, it listed the 8 unit and the 10 unit that I have, and it said $8 and $9. But then you flip the page over, and there's a more detailed chart which is listing like types of glass, types of stain, types of wood species, and all this sorts of stuff. And there it's $2.75 and $3. And I've not been able to figure out what's going on. You know, like, are the more expensive ones, like, is it some sort of really fancy prismatic leaded glass or something? I don't know. But somewhere between $3 and $8 for one of these shelf units. Okay, that's not that much, but it actually is that much because then I went looking and I found two different inflation websites, and it's like, okay, so how much is $3 from 1906 in 2023? And $3 is the equivalent of $100, and $8 is the equivalent of 275. So one of these modules is somewhere between $100 and $300 in modern money. So, okay, maybe it was a bit too generous to call it the IKEA. I mean, it's definitely factory furniture, but that was probably a pretty pricey sort of thing, because when you think about all these modules together, that's going to add up to like the equivalent of $1,000, maybe 300, 600, 700, maybe $750. Anyways, back to the project. This is a Minwax red mahogany number 225. I'm hoping I might end up mixing a couple of stains just to sort of end up with a pleasing color. Yeah, because I tried the dark walnut before and I found it just too brown, but we'll see how this looks. And then a little while later, we just buff it off. So there's the front. I think that's a bit darker and that's a bit redder. Well, let's just try a little bit of the dark walnut on top of the red mahogany. And now I have to try to imagine it with a few coats of shellac on top also. We'll see. Oh. That's a finish pen. There's a few spots where I'm going to try dabbing at it, because yeah, if I can just not have to strip the whole thing, that would be better. I've already accepted that I have to sort of strip the base unit, but maybe not the top. Earlier, I lightly sanded the damaged part of the top, which I missed getting on video. And that seemed to get rid of the worst of the damage, which is why I'm trying some touch-up before I resort to stripping it. Here along the front edge, it's kind of a wear surface, and I just want to, any little nicks, I want to just have it get some color in there, and then I can I'm going to try the rag from where I was just doing, oh yeah, this was the soaked rag from where I was just redoing the base. So give it 4 hours to dry, which probably means tomorrow evening. And then I'm going to go over it with some shellac. Experimentation time using Zinsser Seal Coat, partly because that's the shellac I have, and partly because I want something light. Oh, it's just a little dab, and it gets sticky pretty quickly. Trying to keep it fairly thin, but still covering. From watching a refinisher, my understanding is that you're going to need to do a lot of light and thin coats to really get a good finish. For this experiment, my concern is just, can I get a consistent coat? I just want the whole surface to look similar. And let's see what we get. And then we can maybe, and we've got wax as an option to go over top. All right, picking this experiment up a few days later, I've now done, I don't know, 5, 4, 6 coats of shellac. It's really hard to keep count. First, the part where I stripped it to bare wood, I think this is looking really nice. This front is still a bit darker, but still, for what it was, this is a really good match. In comparison, here's the other side, which I have not done anything with yet. And then this is quite dark, so I mean, I don't actually mind that. I'm going to strip this one. And now the shelf topper, I think, is also looking pretty good. It's a bit glossy over here, and then here there's a few spots where it's just not quite looking as glossy. And I'm willing to chalk that one up to experience. I mean, I've used shellac before, but not that often, and I've never really done the French polish technique where you take the cloth and soak it and then you go in circles and polish it in. That's what I've tried to do here. I'm still very happy about the fact that, you know, I was able to repair this as opposed to stripping this completely down. And I'm going to deal with this gloss by using this 3M pad, which is, this is the equivalent of steel wool, but it's not steel. And if I buff it lightly, it takes it all down to a uniform mat. And once I get that done, I'm going to try applying some paste wax. So this is all now down to a low satin or even more of a muted. And then we're going to take some paste wax. My understanding, you know, furniture of this era, that's what they would normally do, is they would cover it with paste wax after the shellac has cured. So let's get this onto here. And when it's dry, take a clean cloth and we shall buff it and add a nice shine over the whole thing, hopefully. Yeah. And there, yeah. Not perfect, I'm no master refinisher, but I'm pretty happy with that for now, I think. Maybe another coat later on. Okay, I think I'm satisfied with my little finishing experiment. So where does that leave us with the whole piece? Because I know this video is getting good and long. For the base, I've now stripped the other side and I stained that, and I think the base is done. I think I'm gonna put a coat of shellac over the front also when I'm done. The top cap, I think is finished completely, so that leaves the two glass front areas. This is the larger 10 1/4 unit, and this one, I think the stain is fine. It doesn't need any mechanical repair. I took the door off so that I could just clean things and have easier access. The glass is still dirty, needs a bit more work, but the unit itself is in good shape. There's a few nail pops that I need to deal with, and the back is a bit loose, but I could just a little bit of tappy tap with the hammer. Yeah, a couple of these nails need to be set in deeper. Now let's put that aside and look at the 8 1/4 unit. Or rather the 8 1/2, I keep getting the names mixed up. Now this piece is a bit worn here. I might try doing a little stain touch up along this. Haven't quite decided yet. This is the one where it's a bit rippled here. And for this, I'm thinking of trying a bit of heat, seeing if I can squeeze it down. I was thinking I would replace this. My wife talked me out of that. She's like, we're just gonna keep this as original as possible. And it's a bit lifted, but not a ton. So if I can maybe get some heat into that, squeeze some glue in, hopefully that'll help. I showed this earlier. This piece has a lot of water damage here. And again, I don't know, maybe I'll just try a bit of heat to see if I can re-glue it. If I don't have to replace anything, that would probably be for the best. On the crossbar, it was missing a nail both here and at that end, and I replaced it with a screw. And that was intentional, because I want somebody who looks at this piece in the future to realize that this is something that's been added later, and not that I'm, you know, trying to pretend that it's original. And I mean, I didn't have any of the right kind of nails, but it still was intentional what I did. I'm gonna start over here where there's just a little gap that I think I can just fill with glue and then clamp into place. Let's try to force it down in there. I'm going to put a block across it to spread the clamping force. Keep it nice and flat. There we go. Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully that will take care of that. Making the finish bubble, I have to be careful. Maybe I'm not going to be doing much heat. All right, note to self, shellac does not like heat. Let's see if I can get some glue in there though. Do not have high hopes for this repair, but gotta try. I've already decided I'm not taking this apart, so anything that I can do to make it a little bit better. That's gonna go there. Okay, all clamped up. We shall see if that improves things. That's a lot better. Not perfectly flat, but really nice. And these gaps are all nicely closed up. Well, let's check this one. The front is nicely glued down. There's just a little ripple here inside, which I think we're going to live with. I'm also going to freshen this up with just a quick once over with some shellac. I just like to see if that just freshens up the finish. Very thin. Sort of fills in a couple of little scratches that were there. And the same on the sides, just a quick wipe with the damp shellac rag. Hopefully, yeah, blends in some scratches. And I think that's about as far as I'm going to take this antique rescue. First, a lot of just soap and water, and where it was necessary, I stripped it back to bare wood and then stained and refinished, and where it wasn't necessary, I left it alone. After staining this, I went over it with shellac, so it's the same finish as the rest, and for the rest of it, I went over it with shellac too, and the unique properties of shellac are that it burns into the old finish, so it renews the finish. Like, here's the front. I did nothing to this front except washed it, and then I just wiped it down once with some shellac, and it's really clean and fresh looking. With a bit of glue and clamping, I was able to fix this loose spot here. I did not do anything here. I mean, maybe a pro would be able to get this flat, but this plywood is so thin here. It's very delicate. And I'm very pleased that I was able to get rid of all the water staining off the top and return it to a nice look. As I said before, this is by no means perfect, but I still think it's miles better than it was, and I'm pretty happy with that. So is this restored 100-year-old Barrister bookcase now worth $1,000 or more? I have no idea, because I have no intention of selling it. I've been fascinated by Barrister bookcases since I started the hobby, so I'm keeping it. But I do know that it's worth a heck of a lot more than it was when it was tossed out in the trash and left on the side of the road. So I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I hope you enjoyed stopping by, and we'll see you on the next one.